The sea that morning was calm, almost unnaturally so, like someone had placed a glass sheet over the horizon and silenced everything underneath. I was walking alone along the shoreline, my shoes in one hand, my other hand tucked into the pocket of a light jacket that didn't quite shield me from the wind. It was a Tuesday in early spring, when the beach was mostly empty, save for the occasional jogger or dog walker, and the air smelled of salt and cold and a distant memory of summer. I wasn't looking for anything. If anything, I was trying to stop looking, for reasons, for answers, for someone to blame. My engagement had ended just 2 months prior, quietly, bitterly, without a dramatic fight or final word. Just a drawn-out realization that the person beside me didn't see me the way I needed to be seen. It was the kind of break that doesn't shatter, but dissolves. And now, I wandered through my days like a half-written sentence. The ring caught my eye only because the sunlight hit it at just the right angle, a flicker of gold against the dull, gray sand. I crouched down instinctively, brushing aside grains with slow fingers, as if afraid it would vanish before I could touch it. It was a simple band, warm-toned, slightly weathered, but intact. No gemstones, no design. Just a thin line of engraving on the inside. E.L. My breath caught. Those were my initials. Not just the letters, the same curve I used when signing documents, the same slight tilt I always made on the L. I turned the ring over in my fingers, convinced it must be coincidence, a trick of the mind. But the engraving was unmistakable. Clean, deliberate. Like it had been placed there for me to find. I stood motionless, the tide inching toward my toes, waves licking at the hem of my jeans. 1,000 explanations ran through my mind: coincidence, someone else with the same initials, a forgotten gift, a prop from a movie set. But none of them settled the uneasy rhythm in my chest. I slipped the ring into my pocket, not knowing why. Maybe because something in me whispered that I hadn't found it by accident. That evening, I examined the ring under warm kitchen light, tracing the letters again and again. I even tried it on. It fit perfectly, not loosely, not tight. As if it had been made for me. The next day, I returned to the beach. Not to look for more answers, but because I couldn't stay away. I needed to see the place again, to retrace my steps, to make sense of the moment. As I stood where I had found the ring, a voice behind me broke the quiet. "You found it, didn't you?" I turned. A man stood a few paces away, watching me with the strange certainty of someone who already knew my answer. I didn't recognize him. But there was something familiar in his posture, in the careful way he spoke, as if words, once spoken, couldn't be taken back. He stepped closer. I'd been waiting to see who would find it. And suddenly, I realized, he wasn't surprised at all. He'd left it there. For me. For a few moments, I could only look at him, not in confusion, but in quiet disbelief, the kind that doesn't scream or demand answers, but simply waits, knowing that something inexplicable has already taken root. He stood calmly, hands in the pockets of his coat, his eyes steady, almost too calm for someone who'd just watched a stranger find a ring he'd planted in the sand. And yet, nothing about him felt intrusive. There was no urgency, no smile, no performance. Just presence. I asked him who he was, or maybe I didn't ask out loud, I'm not entirely sure, because he began to explain as if he'd been waiting to do so for a long time. He told me that the ring had belonged to his grandmother, that it had passed down through generations of women in his family, and that he'd been told, half jokingly, half seriously, to give it only to someone who didn't want to be found. His grandmother used to say that if love was meant, it would find its way not through grand gestures, but through quiet inevitability, like the tide bringing back what had been lost. He said he'd been carrying the ring for years. Not wearing it. Just holding it, waiting for a moment that would feel like more than coincidence. He came to the beach often, always at odd hours, sometimes before sunrise, sometimes after dusk. He wasn't looking for anyone, he insisted. Just listening. Then, a few days before we met, he said he woke up with the certainty that the ring needed to be placed in the sand. Not handed to anyone. Not buried. Just left, where the sea might claim it or deliver it, where someone might find it if they were meant to. He hadn't expected it to be me. But when he saw me that morning, standing at the edge of the tide with the ring in my hand, he said he felt a stillness inside that he hadn't known for years. I didn't know whether to believe him. The story sounded fragile, absurd even, like something from a fable whispered between old friends. But the way he looked at me, with neither urgency nor need, only recognition, made it impossible to dismiss. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't asking me for anything. He simply believed that the ring, and its path, had done the work already. We talked for a long time that day. Sitting on the cold bench that overlooked the sea, our legs stiff from the wind, fingers curled around coffee cups gone lukewarm far too soon. He told me about his job, something in design, flexible, quiet. I told him about the engagement I had left behind, about the hollow days that followed, and how I'd come to walk these shores simply to remember what silence felt like without sadness. He listened carefully. Not to respond, but to receive. As if everything I said was a page he was folding into memory. In the days that followed, we met again. Not by planning. Not by promise. Just by presence. A rhythm began, unspoken, unforced. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes not. There was no need for performance, no questions of future or definitions. He never asked me to wear the ring. He never even brought it up again. It sat in the small ceramic dish on my kitchen shelf, next to my keys, as if it belonged not to the past or the future, but to the space in between. Weeks passed. Winter crept closer. And somewhere between the tide and our shared silences, something real began to form, not urgent, not dramatic, but deeply rooted, like sea-worn stone, solid, quiet, and unshakable. One evening, as we sat watching the horizon fade into dusk, he finally reached for my hand, not to claim it, but to hold it, like someone returning to something long promised. I turned to him, and for the first time, said what I hadn't yet allowed myself to feel. That maybe love doesn't always come crashing in. Maybe sometimes, it waits, quietly, patiently. Until we're finally still enough to see it.